Well, what the heck is going on in Keir Starmer's Britain? The anti-Semitism crisis has spiralled out of control. He's now being called Keir Starmer Jew Harmer.
He's been Prime Minister for almost 2 years now. Almost 2 years. He still is talking about potentially prescribing it at some point in the future. It's a disgrace. It's absolutely disgusting.
Keir Starmer thought a polite visit to Golders Green would show leadership instead. He got booed, jeered, and publicly humiliated by the very community he's supposed to protect. A terror attack in broad daylight left Jewish residents fearing for their lives, while the Prime Minister's plans amounted to meetings and empty words. Meanwhile, citizens are asking the hard question no one in Westminster wants to answer. If even Starmer can't keep the streets safe, who can?
Well, you use the word fear. Fear is the operating word. This is how terrorists operate. They look to engender fear in populations, and I'm afraid, and as tragic as this is to say, they have been successful because we have had weak-kneed politicians for too long. We have had two-tier policing at the expense of the Jewish community for too long. And, you know, for the Prime Minister to sit there and say he's taken action by having another meeting and then naming the attendees of that meeting, I think, frankly, is deeply insulting. This is not new information.
Now, let's go back to what actually happened on those streets, because the attack itself is where this story truly begins. A 45-year-old British citizen, born in Somalia, carried out what police have now formally declared a terror incident in the heart of one of London's most visible Jewish neighborhoods. Shloy Rand, 34, was attacked and later discharged. Moshe Shin, 76, remains hospitalized. These are not statistics.
In this video, the attacker circled in red is running towards him. When they come together behind the tree, he's stabbed and runs for his life. He's now recovering in hospital with an injury to the lung.
These are people who walked out of their homes on an ordinary day and became targets. And here is what makes your blood run cold. This was not a neighborhood selected by accident. Golders Green had already seen a synagogue attacked, a Hatzolah ambulance, a Jewish emergency service vehicle, set on fire.
Do you hold the government partly responsible for what's happened to you today?
Definitely. If the streets in London are not safe for Jewish people, then it's definitely the government who they are the ones able to take care of the problems, and they're not doing their job.
You are looking at a pattern of escalating, deliberate targeting of Jewish life in one specific area, and the question nobody in power seems willing to answer directly is, how did it get this bad?
He's angry. I have to say, he's used those words to me. He was very angry at the fact that this is a pure hateful attack on an innocent Jewish person minding his own business, going to the synagogue to pray, and on his way in he gets attacked and stabbed by someone who obviously is full of hateful against Jewish people.
The attacker had been flagged by Prevent, Britain's counter-terrorism program. The case was opened, reviewed, and closed after 6 weeks. Then this happened. Prevent is taxpayer-funded, staffed by professionals, and meant to stop exactly these threats. Yet, it faces criticism for focusing on low-risk individuals while missing real dangers. This is not a theory. It is a documented pattern of failure, and communities are now paying the price.
The UK Prime Minister, when he travelled to the scene of the attack at the weekend, and this is how he was greeted by Jews there. Have a look.
When Keir Starmer arrived at Golders Green, he did not receive the silence of a grieving community. He received something far more politically devastating. People screamed at him. They accused his government of abandonment. They pointed fingers. Some of them were elderly residents who have lived in that neighborhood for decades, people who remember what it meant to feel safe there, people who no longer feel that way. For Starmer, it was not just an uncomfortable moment. It was a live, unscripted verdict on his leadership, broadcast for the entire country to see.
They clearly booed him. And I want to point out as well, the same thing happened when the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he went to a vigil for the Bondi massacre late last year, and he too was booed by Jews there.
Think about that from a purely political standpoint. You are the Prime Minister. You show up to demonstrate solidarity, and the very people you claim to be protecting publicly reject your presence. That is not optics. That is a collapse of trust. And trust, once broken at that level, is almost impossible to rebuild with a speech or a press release.
Words are easy, actions are difficult, and the actions are clear. Both the leaders, Albanese and Starmer, they're not protecting Jews. And frankly, when you look at England overall and the UK overall, it's just a microcosm of how Starmer is treating its overall citizenry. Nothing more horrific than the scandal around the grooming gangs. And if you have a prime minister that when he was in the prosecutor's office, turned a blind eye against young girls being raped and sexually abused at scale, sweeping it under the rug.
Here is what the numbers actually look like. The Community Security Trust recorded 3,700 anti-Semitic incidents across Britain in 2025, the second highest figure ever documented. These are not all physical attacks. They include threats, vandalism, harassment, verbal abuse, a daily low-level terror that adds up to a community permanently on edge. Jewish families in neighborhoods like Golders Green are checking WhatsApp groups not to share recipes or school updates, but to find out if someone they know is among the victims. That is the reality of life right now for thousands of British citizens, and it is happening in plain sight.
In a statement ahead of this rally tonight, they said we need to dispense with the political platitudes, asking Prime Minister, what is your plan? They say things are only getting worse. More Jews attacked, synagogues burned, more lives at risk, asking what action is the government taking? They are quite literally taking this to the Prime Minister's front door tonight.
What makes this even more troubling is the broader picture of what British Jews say they experience beyond the headline incidents. Parents telling children not to wear anything that identifies them as Jewish on public transport. Residents removing mezuzot from their front doors. Business owners quietly closing up because the risk of being a visible target feels too high. This is not medieval Europe. This is 2025 Britain. And when a community reaches the point where hiding identity feels safer than expressing it, you are not dealing with isolated incidents anymore. You are dealing with a systemic failure of protection.
Don't want more funding for security, we want the threats to stop.
This cannot happen again. It's not too much. Never again should people be getting stabbed on these streets.
I'm angry, very angry, but also quite afraid for the future.
Now factor in what was happening simultaneously outside Downing Street. The campaign against anti-Semitism led a rally demanding answers, demanding a real plan, demanding that words be replaced with results. And just streets away, counter-protesters were chanting slogans that police were forced to monitor as potential hate speech. The tension was visible, the division was physical, and the government was caught directly in the middle, trying to manage optics while the streets made clear that optics were no longer enough.
So this is obviously a small-scale protest, but what Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, is talking about is the cumulative effect of having march after march on the pro-Palestinian cause.
Britain is debating whether to temporarily restrict pro-Palestine marches, given links between these events and spikes in anti-Semitic incidents. Free expression matters, but when slogans verge on incitement and anti-Semitic attacks predictably rise, at what point does the right to march conflict with another community's right to safety? This is a real civilizational tension the government has failed to resolve.
Funding already in place. We need to increase that to give the level of protection that is needed. We need to take measures to deal with malign state actors. But we also have to be really clear that we need to get to the root causes of extremism and anti-Semitism, and so that is what we're doing.
Starmer did announce a funding package, somewhere between $33 and $35 million in additional security for Jewish institutions. And yes, on paper, that sounds like action, but the community's response was telling. Because money announced after a terror attack, after a public humiliation, after years of rising incidents, is not leadership. It is damage control. The warning signs were there long before someone was hospitalized in Golders Green. The prevent file was there. The CST data was there. The previous arson attacks were there. So why did the funding, the enhanced police presence, the serious political urgency, why did all of that only arrive after more people got hurt?
And look, it's sad that it's come to this, and it is an absolute blight on liberal democracies. It's a blight on our leaders that it has come to this, where Jews no longer feel safe and they are leaving. It's frightening. It's absolutely frightening.
There is also an international dimension that remains murky but cannot be ignored. Intelligence reports have pointed to Iran-aligned networks exerting soft influence in Britain's extremist spaces, not necessarily directing attacks, but creating the ideological environment in which individuals radicalize. The British government has been criticized repeatedly for treating this threat with less urgency than it deserves. If that criticism is accurate, then what happened in Golders Green is not just a domestic policing failure. It is the downstream consequence of years of diplomatic and security hesitation at the highest levels.
In broad daylight, in one of the hearts of Jewish London on Wednesday, a man walked up to this elderly victim and stabbed him over and over. Witnesses driving past scrambled to warn people to run.
I screamed to the people, be careful, someone here want to kill, someone here want to with the knife. So the people is run away.
And here is what the media conversation still gets wrong. Coverage of anti-Semitic violence is inconsistent, sometimes treated as a major national story, sometimes buried beneath other narratives depending on the political moment. Jewish community leaders have noted this for years. When attacks happen against other groups, the institutional response is faster, louder, and more sustained. The Jewish community sees this asymmetry clearly, and it feeds a sense that their safety is considered negotiable in ways that others is not. That perception, whether or not every individual case bears it out, is itself corrosive. Because once a community stops believing that institutions treat their suffering equally, they stop trusting those institutions to protect them. So where does that leave Britain? A prime minister humiliated in front of a terror-stricken community, a counter-terrorism system that flagged the threat, then walked away. Jewish families forced to hide their identity in their own neighborhoods while attacks escalate. Funding pledged after the fear, too little, too late. Protests, counter-protests, streets full of tension, and a government still dodging the question every family is screaming, if even the highest office in the land can't protect us, who actually will, and who's willing to be held accountable when the next attack comes?